The Trump presidential campaign is raising money on all of this, raising over $8 million since news broke of the former president's indictment. Joining me right now is the Washington Examiner political investigative reporter and the Steamboat Institute Blankley Fellow Sarah Westwood. Sarah, it's great to see you. Thanks very much for being here. What do you make of this? First, we get the bank records from the Biden influence peddling scam. As soon as we get the bank records 2 weeks ago, the next day, the leak of a Trump indictment begins. And now we actually have the indictment, the former president going to New York today to get arraigned. And now we understand this. The former president has been raising all this money, is number one in the polls. What do you make of it?
Yeah, it's fortuitous timing, certainly, for President Biden to have this indictment follow up, what was some pretty significant news out of the House Oversight Committee obtaining finally those records from the Treasury Department about the Biden's family business ties. The Treasury Department had been dragging their feet for months on handing over those documents. Hard not to see, at least some sort of coincidence in that timing. But it's not a surprise, I think, that Donald Trump was able to raise so much money off of this incident. I mean, think of what kind of seismic event could have put Ron DeSantis, Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, and Donald Trump all on the same side, given how bitter the sort of early days of the primary have been. But here you have the entire Republican Party sort of rallying around Donald Trump because of how unfair the charges appear to be. We don't know what's in the indictment yet, but based on what we know so far, the entire Republican Party is coalescing around Trump because it appears to be just completely politically motivated.
Well, how do we know what's true and what isn't? I mean, nobody has seen this indictment, which is sealed, and yet Yahoo News is reporting that there's going to be more than 30 counts. And Yahoo is also reporting that there will be no mugshot and no handcuffs. How does Yahoo News know that?
That's a great question, Maria, because grand jury proceedings are supposed to be very secret. I mean, they're designed to be shrouded in secrecy to protect the privacy of people who are not yet charged with a crime, who have not yet been convicted. The sort of presumption of innocence is supposed to be protected by this process. That's not what we've seen with the grand jury proceedings. They've been incredibly leaky. There's been a remarkable amount of insight into the witness interviews, into what the DA's office is looking at. That's not how the process is supposed to work. There's also no clear reason why the indictment has remained under seal. I mean, one wonders why, if the charges are serious enough to have Donald Trump indicted, but not, serious enough to be scrutinized by the public. There's some real questions about why we don't know what's in the indictment yet. Now, there could be something a lot more damning than what we know so far from the public record, but based on the information that's out there, it appears that this case could be weak.
That's a very good point, Sarah. What about this idea that there could be a gag order? Isn't it incredible that first they've got an indictment that's sealed, we don't know what it is, and yet he's getting arraigned today, and then we understand that they might tell him, you're going to go to jail for 30 days if you speak about this. We're arresting you and shut up about it.
I would find it very hard to believe that a judge would approve that, given that Donald Trump is an active presidential candidate. He's running for president. So to say that a candidate who has not been convicted of any crime, who still has the presumption of innocence, isn't allowed to campaign for office, I think would be a really legally dubious argument. But, this whole situation has seemed legally dubious. So, anything is possible, but it's hard to see a gag order being approved by a judge.
Unbelievable. What a mess. A new Axios report now is claiming that President Biden is holding off on his 2024 re-election bid, meanwhile, until July or even maybe the fall, Sarah. A Biden advisor says no candidate will affect the timing of their announcement. What do you make of this?
Well, I think that, Biden isn't really in a hurry because he doesn't really have anything to run on right now. I mean, it's a really tumultuous time in the economy, politically. His family is under scrutiny. He has had a string of troubles for the past couple of years. And so if the Biden administration is sort of waiting for everything to get fixed and things to get better, it could only get worse from here. I mean, keep in mind that Joe Biden is also under investigation by the FBI for his mishandling of classified information. And who knows where that investigation and the other ones into his family will go. So perhaps the Biden administration is waiting for a time when the launch isn't coming off of such shaky ground But for Biden, things have seemed to only get worse and worse since the Afghanistan withdrawal.
Well, I could probably guess where the classified documents investigation is going, since they've been sitting on an investigation of Hunter Biden since 2018. It's probably going nowhere. Joe, jump in here. Here's Joe Concha, Sarah.
So, Sarah, as far as the president perhaps waiting, according to this Axios report, until July or even the fall around running, do you think one reason could be is that he simply doesn't want to have to work in terms of campaigning? And this is what I mean as far as an example. I'm looking at his schedule today, the president's schedule. At 11:30 a.m., he receives the daily brief. Then at 2:45 p.m., he meets with the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology to discuss their ongoing work to advance American science. And that's it. He has one event on his schedule. It's at 2:45, and the day is probably over by 3:30. So is it a repeat of 2020 where this president doesn't want to campaign at all or as little as possible because that requires traveling and actually having to work?
That is entirely possible. You know, why make your workload heavier than it needs to be? If you're Joe Biden, you don't have any serious primary challengers. You know that once by continuing to hold the specter of an eventual announcement out there, you've frozen the primary field. So no Democrats are actively exploring a run, as long as the presumption is that Joe Biden is eventually going to get into the race. And he could shorten his campaign season by 6 months or more if he continues to wait. So, if you're Biden, why wouldn't you just keep getting to sort of clock out at 3 p.m. like you said? So, yeah, I think that could be a big reason. Another one is that the Biden administration wants to sort of grease the fundraising numbers. So they want to announce, at the start of a quarter rather than at the end of a quarter. So they want to wait until they can maybe get some stronger fundraising numbers. So there's a lot of reasons why Biden isn't announcing, but a president in a stronger position would have no problem, announcing a reelection at this point, which would be traditional.
It could also be that he's just not capable.
Well, there are a lot of questions about his sort of competency. Nikki Haley has made that a big plank of her platform. And certainly we saw that Biden did keep a really remarkably light schedule when he was running in 2020. He spent a lot of it in his basement. So it would be strange to expect that 4 years later, when he's older and has worked through a whole first term of a presidency, he's going to all of a sudden adopt a more aggressive approach to campaigning.
A coalition of small business owners, contract workers, and franchisees are kicking off a nationwide push to block President Biden's labor secretary nominee, Julie Su. What is your take here, Sarah? The group Stand Against Su, launching a six-figure campaign in Maine, Arizona, West Virginia, Montana on Monday as the Senate considers her nomination. You write in a recent piece, Biden's struggling to get nominees over the finish line despite Senate majority, Sarah.
Yeah, even though the Senate Democrats grew their majority, they are struggling to get a bunch of their high-profile nominees over the finish line because Biden keeps selecting hardcore liberals for positions that are typically nonpartisan. Now, the labor secretary is not really a nonpartisan position, but Julie Su has been accused of going after gig workers, siding with big businesses against workers, things that Republicans really oppose. But the Biden administration recently had their FAA nominee fail because the nominee to oversee aviation safety in this country could not answer basic questions about air safety. They had their nominees to serve on the FCC fail in the Senate because she was a hardcore liberal who had questioned, whether Sinclair Broadcasting deserved a broadcasting license, for example, because they have a slight conservative bent. She had criticized Fox News and was going to be potentially a regulator of organizations like Fox News. So the Biden administration keeps picking hardcore liberals who adhere to this identity politics agenda, and they're struggling to get them through even this Democratic-controlled Senate.
Sarah, great conversation. We so appreciate you. Thank you so much for weighing in on all of that. Sarah Westwood joining us, Washington Examiner. We will see you soon, Sarah.